If you are 13 to 23, watch this to avoid suffering. I've been reflecting on the last decade and the mistakes that I've made and the things that I would change. And I just wanted to share that with some of you who might be a little bit younger than me and maybe coming up on a lot of the milestones or times of life that I've been through recently. And I thought I would just share my mistakes and some of the lessons I've learned so that maybe you can avoid some of the suffering that I've gone through because of the mistakes I've made. So if you're a teenager or a young adult, or you know somebody who is, you can share this video with them or watch this video, and hopefully it will be helpful to you. Mistake number one is not taking education or learning seriously. When I was in school, in high school, and really before, I never really took my education seriously. I kind of just did whatever I felt like doing in the moment. I did the assignments because I had to, but I didn't really care. I wasn't really trying to learn or seeking to grow. And honestly, a lot of it was because school wasn't that hard for me. And I know that's not the case for everybody, but maybe for you or for somebody you know, school itself isn't necessarily that hard. So you don't really have to try. But then you get to college and the real world, and things are not so easy anymore. For me, I got to college and I realized I never really learned how to study in high school because I never really needed to. So that caused a lot of pain and difficulty when I was actually in college and needed to study and didn't know how to do that. So instead of not taking your education and learning seriously, what I would recommend, and the lesson I learned, is to invest in yourself and your future. Pursue what you love learning about. If there's a topic that you really, really enjoy, obviously you need to do other things. You need to be well rounded, but lean into what you really enjoy learning about. You can develop skills even in something. If it's photography, practice that, learn about it, and develop a skill. And read lots of books, books that you're interested in. If there's something that interests you to read about, read it, learn, seek to grow, and invest in your future. Mistake number two, building your life around one person inside of your head. Now, when I was in high school and when I was a teenager, there was a lot of times where there were girls that I was interested in, and I would think about those girls in my head, and I would concoct and develop this whole life about this is going to happen at this point and this is going to happen at this point, and I would have this whole thing planned out when I didn't even know the girl hardly at all. I certainly didn't know her well enough to plan out this secret life in my head with her. And maybe you don't do that. Maybe somebody you know does it. I don't know. But the thing is, I didn't really know who I was. So even if you don't do that specific thing that I was just talking about, if you don't really know who you are, then kind of imagining yourself with somebody else that you have a crush on or whatever it might be, that's not going to serve you very well. And I wasn't pursuing a life that I wanted. I didn't even know what I wanted. I didn't know who I was because I was only focused on somebody else and trying to make sure I could be with that person. So instead of building your life around one person inside of your head, I would say pursue a life and a future that you want and let things come to you. Figure out what you're good at and what you like doing. There's so many things out there, and really you just have to try things. That's the only way you're probably going to learn whether you like something and really find out what you enjoy most is by just trying a bunch of things. And really this will fulfill you. This will give you purpose to find what you enjoy doing, what matters to you, what fulfills you, what fills you up, that gives you energy. And so if you from this mistake I'm talking about, if you're really wanting to be married someday, that's fine. That's great. I'm glad you're thinking about it. But also, and I'm learning this, and I'm saying this because I learned this the hard way, focus on being the right person, not finding the right person. You have to be somebody who, if you found the right person, you found this is exactly who I'm looking for. Well, if you're not who they're looking for, then what point is there, right? So you have to be yourself. You have to be somebody who actually has taken life seriously. So take your own life seriously, figure out what you're interested in, figure out what you're good at, and focus on just being the right kind of person, especially in your character. And then those things will come more often than not. It's just we get in our own heads and we aren't patient. We don't wait for God's timing in those things. Mistake number 3 is laziness. Now, I know I was a teenager and we all like to sleep in, especially when we stay up super late. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with sleeping in. You need sleep, and that's a good thing to do to get the sleep that you need. But also, how much time do we waste? Now, this can be sleeping, but it can also be scrolling on social media or playing video games or really just doing anything that you don't actually want to do. It's crazy that we spend so much time doing something just because I don't really know what else to do. And a lot of that is we don't have discipline. We're just doing what feels good to us in the moment, these momentary pleasures. Part of the problem with laziness is you don't necessarily know what else to do. So instead of being lazy, be disciplined by actually figuring out what you really want in life. Set a goal and stick with it. Figure out what you're working towards and then take small actions every day. Use your time to work towards that thing. Small acts of discipline create your character over the long term. When you do things consistently, you are building your future. You are becoming the person that you want to become when you're acting, when you're behaving in the way that will get you to that result. So, Luke chapter 16 and verse 10 in the Bible says, "One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much." Trajectory. Little things become big things. It might seem insignificant to you now to do whatever you might be thinking about doing, just being lazy in general. And I'll I'll care when I'm older. I'll take things more seriously. I'll be disciplined when I am a couple years older. And it's easy to think that way. But if you have a goal and your trajectory is just 1 degree off, that might not seem like hardly any difference. But if you follow that down the road 20 years, you're going to be in a very different place than you wanted to be in, simply because you allowed that little degree of your trajectory to be off and you weren't constantly doing little actions to readjust to help you actually be aligned with your goal. So little things really help you to develop who you want to be and the life that you want to have and become the kind of person that you actually want to be in your life. Mistake number 4, neglecting your spiritual life. Now, really, this could have been and probably should have been number 1. I just didn't number them with any specific order. But for me, I grew up in a faithful house and I went to a good church. I had a good church family that cared about me, that cared about God, that had zeal for him, that really desired and strove to worship him and serve him and praise him and worship him in the ways that he wanted. But that wasn't necessarily me. On the outside, I was good. But on the inside, I was full of sin and temptation, and I was focused on physical things. It's really easy to become that way. Just because you grow up in a good, faithful, spiritual household with a good church family, that's not your faith. That's your parents' faith. That's other people's faith. But you have to make your faith your own. So instead of neglecting your spiritual life, just like it says in Ecclesiastes, seek God in your youth. Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 1 says, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Don't wait. Don't put off having a relationship with God. Don't wait to draw near to Him. And be serious about sin because it affects so much later on. I wish I had taken sin more seriously when I was a teenager, when I was 13 years old, 14, 15, 16. And I thought, well, this sin, this temptation that I'm struggling with, I'll get over it eventually and I don't have to take it as seriously right now. And maybe I didn't think about it specifically with those words, but I never really put my effort into taking spiritual things more seriously, especially dealing with the sin in my life. You have to take sin seriously now. Don't wait for that. Because, like I said, it affects so much later on your marriage, your friendships. It affects so much. Take it seriously now. Mistake number 5, caring too much about what others think of you. Now, you should care some what other people think of you. I'm not saying live your life in a selfish and self serving way, but it's not good to seek validation from others constantly. That's what I did a lot growing up. I was always looking for somebody else to encourage me, to want to spend time with me, to reach out and to tell me I had value. And when that didn't happen, I felt horrible about myself. I never felt okay with myself. I always needed something from somebody else just to be okay. And maybe you're going through that too, and I know that's hard. And so let me just say, instead of caring so much what other people think that you're seeking external validation constantly, be secure and confident in God and in yourself. You have value because God says you do. And mistake number 6 is mistakes in dating. Now, one of the things I made the mistake of was being too needy. We often, in this day and age, expect way too much of the person that we're dating or that we're married to, honestly. But let's just stick with dating for now. It's not their job to meet all of your needs. It's just not. But if you're expecting them to do everything for you and to meet all of your needs and to take care of everything that you could possibly want or need, they're not going to do that. They're not going to be able to do that. You have to be your own person. Additionally, not establishing or keeping boundaries is a real problem in relationships. And obviously, that can be physical, but it's not limited to that. It can be emotionally, it can be socially. If you set a boundary to spend 2 nights a week together, just focused on your relationship, on having fun with just the two of you. Great, that's fine. Whatever the two of you decide on your boundary, you have to stick to that. Because in the moment when you don't feel like sticking to it, it's easy to just do whatever you feel like in the moment. But you have to remember you made that boundary for a reason. So stick to it. Don't just change your mind in the moment because you feel like doing something else. You will be glad you stuck to your boundary. And then, thirdly, a mistake that I didn't necessarily make, but I've seen a lot of other people make it. And that's not me trying to be judgmental. You can make your own decisions about this and about who you date and how you date. But just something I've seen is a lot of people who date just for fun. So, somebody who dates just for fun, you got to ask yourself, what is the purpose of this relationship? If you're just dating to have fun, but you never see it going further, you never see yourself being able to marry that person, like you think from the get go, I'm not going to marry this person, but then you're choosing to date them, you do realize at some point that relationship is going to end. And either you're leading them on, or you're just causing yourself and that person a lot of pain and suffering that's just unnecessary. So, like I said, I'm not trying to be judgmental, but you have to think about, and I would answer that question for yourself. What is the purpose of dating? So, like I said, instead of making these dating mistakes, I would say maintain your values. Be your own person. Have your own interests, your own hobbies. And you can do some of that with your partner, whoever you're dating. That's great. That's fine. But you don't have to. And you don't have to share all the same hobbies and activities. You can do different things. You can spend time with different people. Yes, you want to spend time together. Yes, you want to have some mutual friends. Those things are great. But you don't want to be needy and have to spend all of your time with that person. Again, that's a mistake I made. Hopefully, you can learn from that. Also, stick to your boundaries. I already kind of touched on this. You make a boundary for a reason. So, in the moment when you don't feel like sticking to it, stand strong and stick to it. I promise you, you will be glad that you did. And thirdly, date intentionally. This is something I actually did fairly well, and I got a lot of advice from other people about this, which is why I did it. But I see dating as you're thinking about you're going to marry this person. If you could not see yourself marrying whoever it is that you're choosing to date, why are you dating them? So I see dating as you are trying to get to know them better to see if you really would marry this person. So you probably already know them before you start dating. But like I said, just date intentionally. That's my advice. Mistake number 7, spending money randomly. Now, this is a big one for me because I am not naturally a saver. I am actually pretty impulsive. In fact, I've had conversations with my wife about some of the money I made before we were together for a couple years. And she would ask me, like, where is this money that you made when we weren't together? And I honestly didn't know. I couldn't tell her. And that was difficult because I wasn't intentional with money and I lost a lot of money just because I wasn't spending it intentionally. It wasn't wise. I wasn't responsible. I wasn't being a good steward because really everything that I have is from God. And so if I'm not choosing to use those things to glorify God and for an actual purpose, what am I doing? I'm not being a good steward. So I'd say instead, budget. It's not that hard to budget. Just determine how much money you're spending on each thing and make sure you know where every single dollar you make is going. My wife was great at this. This helped me a ton when we got married because she sticks to a budget. And that when we got married, now I stick to a budget. And yes, I'm not perfect about that still because, again, naturally, I'm not a saver. I'm a bit impulsive. So there's definitely times I go over it. But if you know where all of your money is going, it helps you make sure you're not just spending money randomly on things that you don't actually want to spend your money on. It's amazing that we will spend money on things that we don't even want just because we have money to spend. So be a good steward. Make wise decisions. Save, invest. You will be appreciative of making these decisions in the long run. I had a rough childhood, but the thing is, everyone does. Life is hard and messy. And while everybody's childhood and growing up is different, really the one thing that's consistent is that it's tough. It's hard for pretty much everybody. The thing is, I became really bitter and resentful, and I blamed my parents for the difficult things that happened to me as a kid, the difficult things that I didn't know how to deal with as a kid. And while they were my parents and they wanted to help me, and it was their responsibility to help me, blaming them and being a victim and being resentful and bitter did not serve me at all. And so I would say instead of being a victim, take ownership. You can overcome the difficult things that happen in your life, in your childhood, in your past. I really like the character Batman. And so I think about if you know the character of Batman and his arch nemesis, Joker, they both had difficult pasts. They had hard things happen to them. But they also both had a choice of what they would do about that. And that choice that they made was the difference between becoming either a hero or a villain, between living for other people, helping them, serving them, protecting them, and living for yourself and taking things that you want and hurting people and not caring about other people. They both had hard paths, difficult things to overcome, and they had a choice to make. And I would say you're faced with the same decision. I was faced with the same decision. I had a difficult past. You probably have a difficult past. What decision are you going to make? And even if it was someone else's fault, even if it was my parents' fault that my childhood was difficult, it doesn't serve me to play the victim, to play the blame game. So even if it was somebody else's fault, so what? It's not going to help me. It's not going to get me into a better place of life to just feel sorry for myself and be a victim. So take ownership and overcome your struggles and the difficulties in your past. And you don't have to do that alone, but just don't be a victim. Mistake number 9, being passive towards your future and your career. Now, going through school and into college, there's kind of this belief that I had at least that a degree equals a job. And while a degree certainly helps with getting a job, it is definitely a good thing to pursue if you are inclined to college. It does not necessarily just get you a job, especially if when you're going through college, you're just doing what's fun and easy and you're there to party and have a good time and you're not really taking your studies or your life seriously. College is a tool, just like work is a tool. You can not really put your heart into it, not really put any effort into it, not really get anything out of it. Or you can put a lot into it and get a lot out of it. Another thing with college, and something that I made the mistake of doing a lot, is I was constantly just thinking about things. Now, you do a lot of reading, you are learning, so you are thinking about things a lot. But if you only ever think about things and never actually do anything, there's a huge gap in what you're learning and how you are preparing for your future if you're only ever thinking and theorizing about things and never actually doing them. So instead of being passive towards your career and towards your future, I'd say be proactive. Now, you might have heard that before from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens or People. There's several books that are slightly differently titled. But this is one of the most important habits you can learn for your life. Be proactive. Take action, work, develop skills, be willing to fail and learn. You're going to learn a lot more through trying something, actually taking action and failing and learning, rather than thinking it through for months or years before you finally take action and then you make the same mistakes that you didn't even know you would make, but it took you that much longer to take action and do that thing. You could have just taken action, started developing those skills, and been willing to fail and mess up some, because that's gonna happen. And you'll learn and you'll actually develop yourself a lot better that way. So don't just think that college is a ticket to a good job. You have to develop yourself. You have to take things seriously. Actually learn and apply what you're learning. Take it into the real world, work, take action, do what you're learning. And lastly, mistake number 10, don't be selfish in marriage. Now, this is something that usually comes right around college or a little bit after. For me, it was while I was in college, and for a lot of my friends, it's been either in college or right after. But a mistake that's easy to make is just focusing on what I want, focusing on what you want, and not what the other person wants or needs. It's really easy to be prideful, to think that I am better or that I know better than my spouse does. And it's really easy to think that it's all about me. Marriage is not for selfishness. Marriage is not to give me the life I want. Yes, I want to be married, but marriage is for serving someone else. So instead of being selfish in marriage, serve and sacrifice for your spouse. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 and 2 says, "Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." And then if you look at Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 21, it says, "Submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ." So it talks about loving and serving or submitting. These are two things that he also goes on to talk about marriage in the next verse, chapter 5 and verse 22. These are two principles for marriage: love, sacrifice, and serve, submit. Be like Jesus. That is the message there. Imitate God, imitate Jesus. Be like Jesus was. He sacrificed, he served, he loved. So do that in your marriage. Serve, sacrifice, love the other person. That is what marriage is for. So these are 10 of my mistakes, and they're not all of them. I've made a lot of other mistakes, but I hope that you can learn from these mistakes. And also, my advice is to listen. Not just to me, obviously, you're watching this video and that's fine. You can listen to me, but listen to the people around you. Listen to your parents. Listen to the elders and the preacher at your church. Listen to other adults who care about you, who are trying to help you, because they've made plenty of their own mistakes, that you can learn from, and they want you to learn from their mistakes. They don't want you to have to suffer and go through the same pain and difficulties they did because of the mistakes they made. So, my advice would be to listen so you can avoid making these same mistakes and suffering unnecessarily.